So this is Rochelle, this is one of my best friends, and today I've decided to show you how to do a more smoky eye dramatic look. So the first thing I'm going to be using is this Smashbox eye primer, which is the 24-hour shadow primer, and I'm going to take this and put it all over her lids. When you use an eye primer, you always want to make sure that you apply it with your fingers and not a brush. And then you'll also notice that I'm using the primer through her brow, and it's because I know she's really peculiar about her brows, so I want to make sure that her brow stays in place all day long. Next up, I used primer water spray all over her face. She said that she is a little bit more oily, but I just really want to make sure that with this look, her skin is going to look really fresh and glowy because I'm going to go pretty dramatic on the eyes. For her next product, I'm going to be actually using another primer, and this is the Smashbox Pore Minimizing Primer, but I'm going to do a little cocktail. So I'm going to put this one through her T-zone because that's where she's more oily. So I'm going to put it through the forehead, through her cheeks, across her nose, and a little bit on her chin. But I don't want to use it through her entire face because she is a little bit more combination, and I just want her skin to look pretty poreless. So I chose to use two primers. After priming the whole face, I'm going to go in with this Anastasia Beverly Hills Modern Renaissance palette. I bought mine at Ulta, and I'm going to go in with this bone shade that's in the palette, and I'm going to set her primer because her primer is going to be really tacky right now. So I'm just taking that bone shade and setting it all over her lid from her lash line to her brow bone. I'm going to be using this shade next as her crease shade. So again, I'm not doing it really clean. I'm just really running it through her crease. And again, I don't have to worry about the edges, like on her outer edge of her eye, because I haven't put on her concealer or her foundation, so it can look messy right now. But note how far back I'm holding the brush. The further back that you hold it, the less pressure that's going to be applied to her eyelid. So if I were holding the brush really close to where the actual bristles are, the heavier the pigment is going to be. But a crease shade, you always want it to be very loose, very airbrush looking. So just pay attention to that part. So after I've built up the crease shade to the intensity I want it to be, I'm going to go in with this warmer shade, and I'm going to buff this just a little bit lower than I used her crease color. I just didn't want the look to be too purpley. I want it to be a little bit warmer toned. She does have brown eyes, so the warmer tones would really bring out the more golden colors in her eyes. So I chose to mix a crease color with cool tone and warm tones. I decided to zoom you in a little bit, and this is me just taking that warmer tone still and brushing it along her crease and a little bit below the crease. But you can tell the pressure I'm using and how far back I'm holding the brush, and I'm just messily adding the pigment into where I want it to go. I'm taking this dark brown shade and I'm actually going to be pressing this into her lid. Note that I've now switched my brush, so I'm using a flat bristle brush, and this is really going to pack on the color for her, and it's just really going to build up the intensity. But always when you want to pack on color to get definition and you want to deepen the look, you always want to use pressing motions instead of the windshield wiper motions where you would usually use that just for the crease color or when you're really trying to blend something out. So you'll see me pressing the product into her lid to get the correct depth that I'm really looking for. And right here you see me flipping the brush. So I'm back to the crease brush that I was using. And now I'm buffing out that edge because I want that dark brown to blend into that warm and cool tone crease color that I've added already onto her lid. So now at this point, I already have done her other eye, but when you're really building up a smoky eye, it will take you a little bit longer to achieve the look because after you keep packing on that dark brown and then have to go back with your crease color to blend it out so it looks really seamless, just know that don't stress, it's always going to take time to build it up, but I did this about 3 times. Like I packed on the brown color and then you see me right here flipping the brush around, blending out the crease color, and then I go back in with the brown shade again. It took me about 3 or 4 times until I was like, okay, this is the intensity that I wanted, and now I'm going to move on to the next part. Going into that same palette, I'm going to actually take this warm shade again, and I'm going to run it through her crease. And after all that blending and back and forth, building up that dark brown and her crease color, I've lost a little bit of that warmth, which is what I really wanted to show. So I'm just going in and adding a little bit more through her crease. Sorry about the bad clip right here, but I'm trying to show you that I'm switching my brush, and I'm actually just going in with another warm shade just to keep buffing out that brown color because it looked, I could see the line still where I was packing on the color. So again, you're just always going back and forth, building it up to what you want it to be, and then really just making sure that it's all blended and more seamless all together. After I have blended it all as much as I want it to be, I'm going in with this bone shade again and highlighting under her brow bone. And I'm really just dragging it down a little bit so that it looks all seamless, so that her crease shade blends into this really light bone shade color. I'm going to go back into this dark brown color again, and I'm going to be pressing it onto her lid. I've lost some of the depth that I wanted from the dark brown, so again, I'm just packing it on. And again, it's just back and forth, back and forth. So after packing on all the brown color, again, I'm going in with my crease brush and just buffing out the edges. So I didn't realize that my camera had stopped recording, but as you can see on her right eye, I do have a pigment on here. So I'm going to show you, this is the pigment that I'm using. It's like a blue-brown color, and it's by Makeup Geek. So I'm actually just taking the pigment on my finger and I'm just pressing it right over that brown shade. That's all I've done. My finger is not wet. I don't have primer on there at all. I'm just literally tapping that pigment right over the brown shade. After packing on that pigment, I'm just going back with that same crease brush and I'm just buffing out the edges. I just want it to be seamless again. So here I'm going in with this brown Calvin Klein eyeliner, and I'm going to put this in her waterline. So again, you always want to tell your clients to look up in a corner and just really gently move it along her waterline. I'm moving on to her concealer, and I'm using the Smashbox 24-Hour Studio Skin Concealer. And I chose the color Light Neutral. Always tell my clients to look up when I apply my concealer, and I'm using a very, very small foundation brush, so it's kind of like a concealer brush. And I want to make it brighter underneath her eyes, so you'll see that I'm kind of going in a triangle, and I'm also cleaning up around her eyes because I want it to be a more crisp outer edge. And I'm just really lightly buffing it down towards the rest of her face because when I go in with foundation now, I don't have to use as much product when I go in with her foundation because I've blended her concealer through the rest of her face as well. Now when I step back and look at my client, I can really tell that the concealer is a lot more brightening, and this is why it's important to make sure that you're using the right colors and the right technique because now her left eye looks a lot higher and a lot brighter, so always make sure that you use your concealer in the right areas. and just blend it all out. So after I have perfected her concealer, I'm going to go in with the Smashbox BB Water foundation. And I'm going to use my Real Techniques Beauty Sponge, which is the bright orange one. And I am going to press this into her skin. And I'm going to build up coverage, so I'm going to use about 6 to 8 drops. So now after we have perfected the concealer and foundation, I'm going back into this palette with this color, and what I'm going to do is start to smoke out her bottom lash line. So as you can tell, I've told my client to look up, and I'm just really going to keep this color really close to her lash line and start to smoke it out, because I'm really going to start making it more smoky with deeper colors, but I want her to go in with this lighter shade so that the darker color could blend into this color. So now I'm going to go back into this palette with the dark brown shade on a really small bullet brush, and I'm going to press that dark brown into her lash line so that the first color and this dark brown shade can go together. So it just really looks really smoked out on her bottom lash line. So right here, I'm just buffing out the edges again because one of them looked really harsh, so I'm just buffing it out. I didn't have anything on my brush, I was just buffing it all out, and now I'm taking my Real Techniques sponge and I'm just cleaning up the excess. When I was pressing the shadows into her lid, I got a little bit of fallout, so right now I'm just cleaning her up around the edges. So I decided to zoom you in so you could see what we have so far, but it should be pretty blended out. The pigment is really pretty on her eyes, and on her bottom lash line, you'll see that it's starting to be smoked out, but this is what you should have so far. Going back in with this light taupe shade, on another different bullet brush, I'm going to be smoking out her bottom lash line. It was looking a little bit too harsh for me, so I wanted to blend out the edges a little bit better. So now I'm going back to this small foundation brush and I'm cleaning up the edges because when I buffed it all out, it got a little bit down too far for my liking. So now I'm just cleaning up the edges again. Going back in with the bone shade again, I'm going to pop this onto her brow bone and just make sure that everything again is blended. But I just really wanted her brow bone to pop a little bit more, so I'm just adding this bone shade on there. To set her face, I'm going to use this RCMA No Color Powder, and I'm just going to take this and dump it into my hands, and I'm going to be taking a stipple brush and I'm going to be lightly dusting this across, mainly through her T-zone, but a little bit through her cheeks, just because I want to make sure that everything stays in place really well. I forgot to show you the palette that I was using, but I'm using the Smashbox Shape Matters palette. It is the one with the contour, the brows, and the eyeshadow inside of it. But I'm taking the contour shade on a stipple brush and I'm lightly contouring her face. This is the Shape Matters palette, by the way. So I'm going back in with a blush brush and I'm using the bronzer shade, and now I'm going to warm up her face. So this is what's going to go more on the apples of her cheeks, keeping it 2 finger widths away from the corner of her nose, and then bringing it out towards her temple. And then I'm also going to bronze her forehead just a little bit as well. I'm going back into that Shape Matters palette and I'm taking the highlight shade, and this is more of a precise stipple brush, but I'm just lightly dusting it across the tops of her cheekbones to give her a nice highlight color. So once you're done highlighting, your client should look like this with a nice beautiful glow. And then I'm going to teach you a little trick that you can do with your beauty sponge. I'm going to take the sponge with primer water sprayed on top of it, and I'm going to press right over top of the highlight, and this is going to make it look more like it's a highlight that's lit from within instead of where sometimes they can look so sparkly and chunky and really not natural. If you press it right over top a little bit, it kind of presses it into the skin so it looks more natural looking. So moving on to brows, I'm going to be using this Smashbox matte brow pencil in the color dark brown on my client today. And I really like this one because it mimics real hair because it's so skinny. So what I'm going to do is just comb up all of her brows so that they're all going the same direction on both sides. And then what I'm going to do is actually measure her brows. So her brows are a little bit further apart, so I really want to fill them in so that they're a little bit closer to where they should line up by her nose. So I'm going to start filling in really lightly. Again, look at where I'm holding the pencil, because the further away you hold it, the less pressure and the less harsh it's going to look. It'll look more like real brow hair instead of so drawn on. When I'm using the brow product, I also like to go with the hair, and then you'll also see me go against the hair too, so that it really builds in and gives volume, but doesn't look so drawn on, and it's a lot of back and forth movements. And the hair in the front will always grow upwards, so you'll see me flick it upwards instead of left to right, because in the front right here you want it to grow upwards. Now I'm taking my flat foundation brush like we use for the concealer, and I'm just cleaning up around the edges. Moving on to the rest of the face, I'm going to go in with this Makeup Revolution blush palette, and I'm going to start applying her blush. The color I chose in the palette is one of the most neutral colors. It's not so peachy and not so pinky, but right in between. And I just really want it to just give her a flush of color, but since she has so much going on in the eyes, I don't want it to overpower with blush color. So now I'm going in with the Jordana lip liner, and I'm just really going to line her lips, but I'm also going to fill in her entire lip color with this lip liner. Moving on to her actual lip color, I'm going to get into my Bobbi Brown lip color palette, and I'm going to be using something that is a little bit more on the brown nude side, but not so nude that it looks concealed. But I just didn't want her lips to be too pink, so I'm going in with a little bit more of a brown shade to really give her more of a true nude color against this rosy lip liner. Going in to finish up and do her lashes, I'm going to be using the Smashbox Lash Primer, and I'm going to coat her lashes with just one coat of this guy. When you apply your mascara or your lash primer, always make sure that you tell them to look down. I usually tell them to look towards my elbow. This keeps them focused in the right spot. They're less likely to be all over the place or blinking. It just keeps them a little bit more concentrated and focused on one spot while you apply it. After I am done applying her lash primer, I'm going to go in with a coat of mascara. I'm just using a L'Oreal Voluminous Black mascara. You can use anything that you have. But I'm really going to lift her brow so that I can really get in really close to her lash line. And I'm going to build in a lot of volume on her lashes. Now that I've coated her lashes with mascara, I'm going to go in with these Ardell Demi Wispy lashes. I really love these lashes, so I'm going to pop these on. And my first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to measure the lashes just to make sure that they're not too long. Otherwise, you're going to have to trim them up a little bit. So you'll see me do that in just a minute. So now that the glue is dry and it's tacky, I'm going to press it onto her lid, or right above her lashes. And I always start right in the center because that's where you want to make sure that it's really attached. And then I go in and pop on the corners. I also highly recommend this eyelash glue. It's by House of Lashes. I got it online, and some Sephoras do carry it in store, so I would check it out because it's definitely worth it. I'm actually going to take this mini size lip and cheek stick from Smashbox. I'm going to take a little bit of this and just pop it right in the center of her lips. This will make her look even more full and just give her a little bit more dimension. So now that I'm all done and stepped back and really looked at Rochelle's face, I'm actually going to add just a little bit of something underneath her eyes. So I'm going to go in with this Smashbox Lighting Theory palette. They sell it at Sephora. I'm actually going to go in with this peach shade. These are the cream correctors. So I'm actually going to take this peach shade and I'm going to pop this right underneath her eye. And this peach corrector is really going to brighten, and looking at the footage now, it looks really awesome because you can see a huge difference. And after I was done with Rochelle's makeup, she was like, I have to have this corrector. It made a big difference. So you'll see side by side in just a minute. Right here, looking at the picture head on, you can really tell that it like lifted and brightened her whole under eye. It looks all completely seamless and like one color. Completely made a huge difference. And then I went in back with this palette again and took the highlight shade. And I'm actually just going to run this right down the bridge of her nose, a little bit through her forehead, and just on her chin, just because I really wanted to make sure that she's all balanced. I did bronze her forehead. Rochelle has a beautiful oval face, but I just wanted to make sure that her chin was dominant because her chin is a little bit shorter, so I just wanted to make sure that she was a perfect oval shape. So that is why I highlighted her forehead, her nose, and her chin. So right here, I'm just taking my beauty sponge again and just pressing everything into the skin so it looks really seamless, looks like skin. And then we are finished. I will set her with a little bit of primer water, and that completes this look.